But 20 years in the Legion will make a boy man. 20 years in the Legion and they will give you land. 20 years in the Legion, you'll always have a home. 20 years in the legions of Rome.
Just 20 years in the legions of Rome. Yay! Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So, welcome to How Shit Works, the show where we look behind the scenes of how shit runs in the Kingdom of Meridies, and probably other kingdoms too. Hell, I don't know. Anyway, so I am one of your hosts. I am Ulrich. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I'm very excited apparently to do one. I'm a knight, a pelican, a role peer, and I have opinions. So I'm joined by, that's it, this side. I'm joined by the Knight of Kittens himself, the bringer of joy, Sir Erik Martell.
Hi, everyone. I am the Knight of Kittens, the bringer of joy. I am a knight, a landed baron, and the lightest hitting knight in the Kingdom of Meridies.
You are not Mad Kelp. As much as you might like it, you are not Mad Kelp.
Tonight is the 7th episode of our 7th series. And if this were Harry Potter, that would be magically significant. But alas, you're stuck with us. This week, our subject is your first ANS. And who better than the amazing Maestra Serafina Alamanni to walk us through it? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Maestra Serafina Alamanni. I am a court baroness of Meridies and a laurel.
All right. Well, hold on. Weird stuff's happening.
No, dear.
Sorry. No, it's all good. Everything's fine. We're all fine here. How are you? So where we at? We're at welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad to have you here. We have a weird try thing going on. We're all split down the middle. It's very strange. I'm not used to this. It's okay. We're all fine. Things are different. We haven't done these in a while. We don't know. Katerina is fixing it. Apparently, everything's going to be good. Anyway, so drinking words for tonight. Serafina gave us the wonderful word or phrase magnifier, because there's a magnifier coming up, and there'll be lots of ANS going on there. So when we say magnifier, we drink.
I mean, magnifier makes me drink all the time, but you guys should
Right.
drink it.
Because I famously like to drink with Serafina, I also chose the word documentation to make us drink. And as always, anytime we announce, sorry, Katerina, we're going off script. And it is Katerina tonight that's running the show, not the lovely Jessica Vosprey. So our phrasing may be a little bit different tonight. Tonight I'm drinking cider and Fireball, because that's what I drink when I'm with Serafina. So it seems like old home week to me. The drinking game is completely opt-in. If you don't want to drink alcohol, if you don't want to drink alcohol when that comes up, then drink water, drink whatever you want. If you do want to drink, don't want to drink at all, don't drink. You can just go those people in their silly games, and that's all fine. As always, we'd like to thank Between Two Peers, even though they're not around anymore as a show, they are around still as people, for allowing us to steal their drinking game and blatantly and outright make it ours. And I'm perfectly okay with all that. All right. So a quick note. We want to thank our audience for showing up. Yes, ask questions. Yes, put them in the comments. And the question goddess herself, Katerina, will grab those up, and we will try, perhaps oddly, tonight we'll do things a little differently and try and maybe mix those in and answer them sort of as you ask them, as they're relevant to the conversation. If they're not relevant to the conversation, then we may push them to the end. All right. I think that's where I've rambled enough. Oh, one quick thing. Before we move on to the actual tonight's subject, There was a whole bunch of money raised for a non-lives tourney, like $3,700, I think,
That is correct.
for Kitty Cat Haven, the cat rescue place. Is that right?
That is correct.
And because we raised over $3,000, there will be what in the future, Eric?
In the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be recording myself in the cat suit of previous Castle Wars, singing the classic early 80s song, I'm Too Sexy, by the immortal artist Right Said Fred.
And we will bring that to you right here on this show. It may be the only thing we do on that show, but it will be live. You can see it live. It'll also be recorded and be on YouTube and Facebook in Pixel. All right.
Tonight, I'm drinking honey mead, made our own Iron Mountain proprietary brand, Star of the County Down, named after my lovely wife. So let's jump right in and let's get to know Maestra Serafina. How and when did you first find the society?
I started, my first event was Red Tower in 2009. I was working in a lab, and the woman next door, I was showing her how to do sutures. We were sewing on, like, I don't know, paper towels or whatever. And I asked her, do you sew? And she was like, yes. And she comes out with this like Persian garb that she had like stuffed in her lab drawer, that she would sew on lunch breaks and whatnot. And she was like, yeah. And she started telling me all about this SCA. And I was like, I was just going to ask if you knew how to sew. But she was very excited to share the SCA. And it probably took her a good 6 months to talk me into coming to a baronial meeting. But I am in the South Downs, and they had monthly dance practices at the time. And my dance partner had recently moved to Nebraska. So I was looking to do some more dance. So that's how she roped me into finally agreeing to do this crazy thing with her, was bribing me with dance.
Is she still around?
They bribed me to stay around.
Is she still around?
She's in Atlanta.
I'd like to thank her personally.
She and her family moved up to Atlanta.
Okay. Well, whoever she is, thank you very much. You've given the kingdom a wonderful present. So I know you have a love of all things A&S. You really do have a quite diverse number of arts that you follow. But other than A&S, so that includes dance, what's your hook in the SCA and what keeps you coming back?
The people. Definitely the people. I've made some wonderful friends, some lasting relationships. I think half my wedding party was out of the SCA. So, no, I keep coming back for the people and the A&S.
Goes to Eric's statement always, where he's always going on about when people go, I just don't, I don't know what's good in the SCA anymore. I'm like, how about all these friends you've made over the years?
Right, for real. If you prioritize some imaginary thing that you think you won't be able to live without, and you say things like, well, if I don't achieve this, my years in the SCA have been a waste. And I look at these people and I'm like, didn't you meet your spouse in the SCA? I mean, I'm like, seriously. Since perspective.
Actually, met at my second event.
See, there you go. I also met my spouse in the SCA, so I'm a little about this. So speaking of a love of all things A&S, what all do you dabble in?
Well, pre-pandemic, I was doing, there's a local silver shop that was teaching classes and letting open studio time. So I was doing silver forging and silver work. One of the big projects that I got really excited about was I had a bunch of silver scraps from wire weaving, and I melted down all of the scraps, cast an ingot, hammered it, forged it out to the gauge and length that I wanted, made some stamps, stamped it, and I had a lovely little bracelet, which I could not find today because I wanted to show it off. But So that's what I was doing before we were all homebound. And now that we're homebound, I've taken up goldwork embroidery.
I am not surprised at all. Oh, by the way, she also dances a lot.
Yes. In my house, even though people aren't with me.
That's funny. I just had a mental picture of, sure. I had a mental picture of you telling Zoe where to go so that you could.
I also have a toddler, so we're working on the go away and come back.
Oh, well, that's very, very true. Very true. I wasn't sure that she was up to that yet.
She's not. We're working on
it. All right. So with all those different talents, what is your laurel actually in? Since laurels, people get laurels in things.
My laurel is probably in research. What I was working on at the time, my sort of master project at the time was wire weaving. I had several different styles of wire weaving that I was working on and documenting. There's 3 different kinds, by the way. Sorry, I might break over with some of this. Okay, let me go off script or whatever the keyword is there. Changing topics about wire weaving. So in coming up with a drinking word, I was trying to think about trichinopoly. It's this terrible, terrible word that this Victorian coin dude that the British Museum calls the wire weaving that is found in Ireland and the UK. They call it trichinopoly, and it's awful and it's terrible, and it refers to India, and it makes no sense, and the stupid Victorians ruin everything. And so I was thinking about drinking with it. I say trichinopoly because it was bound to come up, but then I decided that just drinking is not good with trichinopoly. You need to take shots of something nasty, it needs to leave a bad taste in your mouth. So I decided on magnifier, which makes me happier. Where was I going with that? Wire weaving. Something.
I don't know, but I've loved this trip.
Oh, right. So I was being very obsessive with terminology, and what wire weaving was found in Turkey, and what wire weaving was found in the Burkett finds, and what wire weaving was found in Ireland, and because they're different, and the Romans and the Etruscans and the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons, and it's different, but it all looks really, really similar. So that was sort of the master project that I was working on when I was invited to join the order. So I guess you could say I was laureled in wire weaving, but I would also tell you that at least the Baltic area wire weaving that most people do, I could show you in 5 minutes and you'd be a master in 15. So it's sort of hard to be like, yeah, I'm a laurel in this art that takes 15 minutes to learn. But in my heart of hearts, what I would hope is that the circle elevated me for my research and dedication to research, because I did get a little obsessive. Does that answer the question, or did I forget it?
No, that answered the question very well, I believe. I just want to point out for the record and for anyone who may be watching that I did not mention the word trichinopoly at all. Nor was I going to.
I knew it was going to come up, but I want bad taste in your mouth. Put soap in your mouth. No drinking.
Well, since phrasing isn't a thing, I'm going to move right on to our next question. And that is, who in the society was your biggest influence in your early years, back when you were a new and impressionable person?
Well, so I met Master Lorenzo at that he was teaching dance at that first baronial meeting I went to, and I ended up apprenticing to him. And he lives locally. We used to go out to dinner after the baronial meetings. So he was huge in my early SCA and sort of understanding how things went together, and my introduction to ANS, and introducing to people that I have met. But in terms of really understanding, so I've worked several reigns. I've had an opportunity to see a lot of behind the scenes, and Duke Thomas and Graf Ulrich were huge in that. Also, so I have a lot of people. I don't know. I'm sure I'm forgetting many. I wish I would remember off the top of my head right now.
That's fine. It's about heroes. I know this is really generally speaking, this is more of a it's often more of a fighter centric question, but I don't think it's necessarily limited to that. Do you have any SCA heroes? And if you do, who are they and why?
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this because I did see some of the prep questions, and I almost asked you just like, don't ask me that. I'm not even sure how to answer that. But honestly, Master Lorenzo, like he and I are very, very different. There's lots of different philosophies about who you apprentice to and why and for what purpose and all of that. And I had an early interest in dance, which is his passion. But I ended up going in a very different direction, and he's completely supportive of that. Like I don't feel like I ended up apprenticing in my area of interest per se. But he's incredible at encouraging other people's sparks of joy. He's incredible at delegating of like, that sounds like a great idea. You do this, which I really admire because I'm awful at that. I've had probably two actually. And so I've been in the SCA about 12 years, and I've probably had two bouts of burnout. Like, why do I do this? This is not fun. So when I say it's the people that bring me back, like I do know what I'm talking about. But Lorenzo is one that like, I don't know that he's ever been burnt out. I'd have to ask him, but he's constantly seeing the joy and the spark. So that's really cool.
No, it's a good one. I would have to ask. I mean, you say you're not you're a research laurel and that you had some interest in dance. By some interest in dance. Can you define what some interest in dance means?
Ball. I can teach some classes. But so all right. So my philosophy,
that was an off-script moment, by the way. Sorry.
My philosophy, yeah, and I'm continuing. My philosophy of sort of what makes a master, and I do not feel like I'm a master of dance because I haven't done the research. I don't know the backstory. I know what I've been taught. I know the moves I've been taught. I know the rhythm. I know the songs. I know the steps. And I enjoy it and I can put it all together. But like, I can't have a master level conversation of, how this dance influenced that dance, and what we call a reprise. Is that really a reprise? And citing, that's speculation. And I haven't done any of the research to form my own opinions. I do citing the way I was taught citing. So that's sort of why I don't claim mastery of dance.
Okie doke. That's all a whole much more about dance than I will ever know. So.
So I actually love SCA dancing, and Gwen and I used to dance all the time, and then we got away from it as we got busier and busier and doing other things. But that's one of the things we're really hoping to look to get back into once we begin having more and more events again. So what's your favorite event, and why is it MGT?
It's probably Magna Faire. Why would it be MGT though? I enjoy MGT. I actually really do enjoy MGT. It's beautiful. Everybody brings out the pomp and circumstance. I have very little responsibility. I will sometimes help various orders with passing of foods, but otherwise I sit under the day shade and watch my friends and chat. And that is a unique event for me because I don't often do that. So if it were MGT, it would be because I don't actually do anything there.
So why is it actually Magna Faire then?
Why is it Magna Faire? It's the first it's the first in the ANS season, so that's when you're the first time you're seeing everybody's new ideas. So there's sort of a season. It's starting with Magna Faire and it goes through Kingdom ANS in May. And so you're seeing people's first stuff come out. It was at the chicken farm, which I don't know was.
That's Woodman of the World Camp in Royal, Alabama.
Yeah, we don't use the site anymore, but it was a site that was used for absolutely everything when I first started in early 2010s. I also really like the layout. So there was a main hall, and everybody was in the hall. all of the ANS was around the hall. There was 1 or 2 years where it was like closed, but then they stopped doing that, which I totally approve of. So you'd have all of the displays set up. You'd have everybody wandering around, people trying to get warm, people chatting, and like everything was in one place, which I guess is similar to MGT. So that was something that I really like about Magna Faire, is everything's in one place, because a lot of the other arts where they try to do classes, which I totally appreciate, things end up being very separated, and you need a site, so you end up having a dedicated ANS room, which I actually think the new starts with a C, whatever the new site that Magna Faire has been out recently. I'm saying it a lot. You should be lots of drinking. The new site that Magna Faire has been out the last few years, it was in person. I think we do a really good job because there's still that central lobby. So people are all together and the art is there together. I don't know. It's like, it feels like a New Year's event to me. So I enjoy that.
No, perfectly cool. So just for some backstory, we asked once we started doing interviews mainly of people and less about people on a subject instead of multiple groups and orders and things like that. We wanted to get to know the people. And I like to push MGT. So I put the MGT question in there with a shoehorn and a hammer. And so everyone gets asked that. But I don't expect MGT to be everyone's favorite event. I mean, it should be, clearly, but I don't expect it to be. So we ask that, and then we always follow it up with what is your actual favorite event and why. So all that said, how did you get started in ANS? It sounds like you just came right in and like, hi, I'm in ANS.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So let's see. Kingdom ANS was probably the 4th, maybe the 3rd event I went to. And I day tripped with Maestra Serena, who was Kingdom ANS minister at the time. So I'm brand new. This is 3rd, 4th, maybe, I don't know, one of my first events. And we were driving over, I don't even remember. Oh, it was down Montgomery area. So 3-hour drive, something like that. And I'm with the ANS minister, and she's, telling me what's going on and whatnot. And I was interested in dance, and I was actually, I think I entered in the open where no documentation is required. So probably my 4th event, and she was like, we don't have any performing arts entries. You like dance, do a dance. So yeah, I really was sort of tossed right in. And then the first ANS entry I did with documentation was my apprentice belt. So I was probably a year and a half in the SCA. And I made my own apprentice belt and entered it in ANS, and then wore it for 7 years until it actually fell apart. And the year it fell apart was the year they invited me to join the Laurel. So I was like, yay, I don't have to make a second one. Or at least I can make a different style.
That's great.
So yeah, I fell into ANS almost right away.
So we were going to ask you what your first ANS project is, but you really just sort of answered that. So instead, I'm going to say, what's the most unusual thing you've ever done for an ANS project?
Actually done?
Yeah, you've actually done. We'll get to
We can talk about that other one later.
Okay. The most unusual one. I don't know. I don't feel like I did anything terribly unusual. I entered my belt. I entered some leather work, a pouch leather work. I've entered card weaving. I entered 2 or 3 different wire weaving entries. Actually, one of the wire weaving entries was probably the most unusual. It's a Finnish find from the 10th century. It's got these little segments of woven wire, and then it's got Arabic coins actually all down it. So it's this like necklace of 3 strings of wire weaving, which was super cool. And I was so excited. I actually had a picture of my iPad with like the museum image and then my image. And I was like, look, this is the thing.
That does sound very cool.
All right, so we're going to get into the actual teaching us about how to enter and coaching us through ANS things now at this point. Unless there's anything that you'd like to cover about you and ANS that we haven't covered so far, or you don't think we'll get into along the way.
No, we can just jump into it.
Okie doke. So I want to get into the ANS side of things. How, in general, do I decide on what I want to get into? What are my options?
I think your options are completely open. Whatever you would like to put on a table or show off in front of a crowd is fair game. What I would encourage is not to really enter ANS until you are interested in feedback. And there's two, and I say that with a little bit of caveat, there's two sort of styles of ANS. There's what we call the open and there's what we call the fair. And the fair has scoring and judging and feedback guaranteed. And the open is you put it on the table and people walk by and go, ooh, ah, so pretty, and leave you tokens, which is awesome. And if that's what you're comfortable with, I just want people to tell me this is pretty, or, maybe spark a conversation with someone else that is interested in, gold work. I have done the gold work I've done over the last year and a half. I've done zero research into appropriate period gold work. I know it can be period, but I haven't looked at patterns. I haven't looked at materials. I haven't looked at any of that. So if I just wanted to make those connections, I could just put I had got a pattern of gold work off the internet and I'm going to put it down on the table. And there'll be some like, do you know that was a 1990s pattern? There'll be a little bit of eyebrow raise if I just sort of slapped my embroidery kit down on the table. But there will also be people that come out and are like, are you interested in gold work? Do you want to know about period techniques? So even if I'm not ready to hear feedback, or I know my project isn't scoreable, like I don't want to talk about what score you might give me, just putting it on the table might still get you those conversations and those contacts. So depending on what you want out of the experience, anything's fair game.
That's cool. All right. Like, so anything's fair game? Like, are there limits?
I'm thinking of where you might be going, but no, there's no limits. There's questionable taste, but there's no limits.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious. Things you might need to know for the future. So normally, Erik and I have a list of questions, and we had that scripted out, and we're going to pop back and forth between them. But we're going to do things a little differently. Erik's going to take the next question. I have a list of questions in here, but if you answer them or have already answered them, we may skip around a little bit. But Erik?
Also, let's be clear. I might skip around anyway because that's who I am.
It is how he rolls.
Sorry. So let's say when I first got into ANS, I thought I was going to be in leatherworking. But instead, I fell in love with the migration era garnet trade. Am I allowed to switch categories I'm interested in?
Absolutely. Anytime you want. You can go back and forth every other event. Totally fine. You can enter leatherwork at Magna Faire. You can enter, garnet trade at Menhir. You can go back to leatherwork at Midwinter. You can enter something entirely different because you embroidered something for your lovely lady. You can enter embroidery at Iris Fair. Totally fine.
Can you do multiple and choose at one event?
Absolutely. Yes. If you want to enter all four of those rather than spreading them out throughout the season, want to enter all four of those at Magna Faire, totally fine.
She said the word.
I say it a lot. I like Magna Faire.
Yeah,
It's coming up. Magna Faire is the first event in the ANS season, and it's coming up in December. We're all looking forward to Magna Faire.
So it's like the first game of the college football season.
Sure. I don't follow football. Sorry.
Okay.
So why is that event, because I'm going to run out of booze eventually, Why is that event at the end of the year but the first of the season?
I have no
Because
idea.
there's a natural brack that happens.
It sounds like an Iron
There's
Man.
not natural break that happens at the end of the year, and that's the last event. It's okay. I have great memories from Magna Fairs. All right. So when do I know that I'm good enough to enter ANS?
You don't have to be good enough. Like there is like when you want to get feedback. If you just want to be told it's perfect, then stay in the open and don't ask for feedback. But it doesn't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be complete. You can have a half cut. Like, so I did a leather purse, and one of them I entered, I didn't finish in time. So I had the body of the purse sewn up, but there's pouches that were on the outside, and I had them cut out, but I didn't have them sewn onto the purse. So I put it on the table with like, look, it's a construction in progress, and here's how I would construct it, and here's how they might have constructed, or it might have been this way, and I'm going to try it this way, and we'll see. Just it wasn't even finished. So you're ready to enter ANS when you're ready for that experience.
So, in my completely uneducated opinion, it sounds like the open is pickup fighting and the fair is the turning. Basically,
Because Eric always has to make it about fighting.
I'm just trying to understand here, and I'm a simple man who gets hit a lot.
But okay, so the way I have never been in armor, but the way I understand pickup fighting, if you're using it to get feedback, if you're using it to be like, hey, Ulrich, fight me, I need you to tell me about such and such a shot or block or show me how to do X, Y, and Z, then you're entering an affair. You're asking for feedback. So the open really is more like, hey, I put on armor and I walked across the field.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a good parallel.
Ulrich and I have opinions, and we really want to say them, but this is about ANS, so we're just going to slide, right?
Okay, moving on. Yes.
With me, buddy? All right. Okay. So documentation. I know like this is a big deal, and you could probably do documentation on documentation. However, we have to keep this, relatively brief. So if you could give us the very basics, the too long didn't read version of documentation, that would be great.
The documentation is some sort of typically written, but not required. Typically written, this is what I know. So again, when you're to the point where you're looking for feedback, it is useful to tell the judges or the network that you're building around your particular area of interest what it is you already know. If you make a decision and you did something different, or you looked into the period ways things would have been done and you tried to do it that way and it didn't work, or you tried to do it that way and it did work, if the reader, I'm not explaining this very well, if the reader knows what you know or understands what you know, then they can give you feedback about, yes, I think that's right, or, oh, I learned something. So documentation is just the usually written of, this is what you know. And that gives the people giving feedback a chance to say, I learned something, that's awesome. Or, are you sure? Or, have you read this book? And it just, that's all it is. Because again, if I put my gold work down on the table and don't put any documentation there, then whoever's looking at it doesn't know. Do I think that that's the period way it would have been done? That pattern that I downloaded off the internet last year and followed the step-by-step instructions. Do I think that that's period correct? If I put even just one paragraph of documentation that says, I'm just learning how to sew. Are my stitches right? Am I doing this right? I've been doing gold work in isolation in my house during a pandemic. Am I doing the stitches right? someone can come in and say, yeah, your stitches are right. Stitching has not changed terribly since the, I don't know what, hundreds, 1500s for probably gold work. And you can start that conversation. So the documentation is that start of the conversation.
So we've got several questions here on documentation. I want to go with, because you kind of covered why it's important to an ANS project. Why is it important to an ANS project? Why do I got to have it? That's the how and the reason. But I mean, why can't I just make this pretty thing and say, hey, see, this is, everyone's seen this dooflaggy thingamajig bobber.
Well, so I'll go back to wire weaving. So wire weaving is something that you probably can master in 15 to 20 minutes. It's not a complex. I mean, you have to have some hand dexterity. Like, I'm not downplaying if you don't master. If it takes you 25, don't feel bad. But but it is a fairly simple technique. It is one piece of material and your hands, and it just sort of magically happens. And if any mistakes you made are immediately corrected by the draw plate. So that's not. So if I show the Knight of Kittens how to do this, and at Magnifair, he enters his wire with his wire woven chain because he spent the 25 minutes learning how to be a master at it. And he puts it down on the table and he says, the Knight of Kittens made a chain. Admire it. That's wonderful for the open. People will walk by and they will say, ooh, look, he made a chain. He didn't hit anybody with it. This is very impressive. And you'll get little tokens. You'll get little tokens, which are really nice. And maybe someone who had an interest in sparkling and furthering your research interest will be like, excuse me, Sir Erik, would you be interested in knowing, like, what culture this chain came from? Why you used this technique and not that technique? Why did you make it out of copper beading wire instead of silver or gold? And at that point, because you put nothing down but your name, they don't know if you're interested in that conversation, if you're not interested in that conversation, if you think all wire woven chains you've ever seen are made the exact same way. They're not. There's 3 different kinds. If they're all made out of copper wire, they're not. Most of them are made out of silver, unless it's the Roman type, and then it's gold. If you're not interested in knowing any of that information, then you've laid it on the table. You've gotten your kudos, and that's great. If you want to engage in that conversation, then having the documentation that says, I learned this new technique. I thought it was kind of cool. I'm pretty sure it's from the Viking era and I made it out of copper because that's what I had. That's perfectly fine documentation. But that's going to engage in a conversation of, okay, you've shown me an interest that you want to know more, and I have hours of stuff to geek out with you about.
That's
Okay.
the best explanation of why we have documentation that I've ever heard.
Okay, but let's be clear. Like, I know there's a score here because I've heard people talking about scoring. And scoring applies that I can beat someone else's score. And as we all know, that's what's truly important in life. Well, I mean, okay, it's not really what's truly important in life, but it is kind of fun. So let's say that someone like Aiden also made did wire weaving. Now, my wire weaving may not be great, but I have to beat Aiden. So how in documentation do I make sure that I get the best Aiden beating score?
All right.
Right quick. You're going to be fine. Aiden's just going to like lay a string of wire down.
The term wire weaving, while ubiquitously applied inappropriately at times, does require some sort of manipulation of the wire, and a wire in and of itself is not woven.
Right, we're talking about Aiden.
All right, so if you're in the open and Sir Erik lays down his wire woven chain and his 25-minute mastery, and Sir Aiden lays down his piece of wire, and you're in the open, you will both get tokens. Aiden might get more tokens. You might get more tokens. There is no winning. Well, that's not entirely true. We might count how many tokens and say this person got more tokens than you, and therefore there's a populous winner. And we call that the populous winner. By popular vote, you have won. And that has nothing to do with your skill or your knowledge or anything else. Sir Erik, you put down a copper wire woven, and Sir Aiden put down a silver wire. His is shinier, and he won. He got more tokens because his was shiny, and yours
That's
was yellow.
bullshit.
So let's be clear.
You were
Aiden is
robbed,
never
Erik.
going to be more extra than I am. So that is never going to happen.
But it's the Open. So the Open is just a populist vote. Not all Opens have a vote. Some of them are just a token of appreciation. But if there's a populist winner, it's just based on a count of tokens. Now, if you want to beat him by score, which they're not competitions, because while if you and Aiden both enter wire weaving, we could maybe look at wire weaving. Again, there's 3 kinds. So what did you each enter the same kind? But like, how does your wire weaving stack up against Ulrich's embroidery, against my leather purse? You can embroider.
I did embroidery? That's awesome.
It's to decorate your
amazing.
Anyway, that's not a competition. You can't compare the skills, the technique, the knowledge, the documentation, the difficulty of documentation, the readily availability of documentation. I'm sorry, I'll stop saying that word quite so much. I won't really, but I will at least breathe between saying it. You can't compare someone's leather purse to a quiver that was made to a wire weaving entry. So it's not a competition in that sense. In terms of scoring well, if you're interested in entering in the fair, in the scoring part, there is guided documentation and and there are rubrics available online, and you can look at exactly what the judges are looking at. And all of the categories say as supported by documentation. So what you would do to get a better score is you would provide more of the requested information, typically in a written form. You can do it verbally if you want. You could do it in picture format if that works for you. It doesn't have to be complete sentences. Like, seriously, this is not as scary as people make it out to be. But it is, because you're putting yourself out there, and that's always scary.
But wait.
You would include more information than he did about the accuracy of your piece, and therefore end up with a higher score.
But wait, is the documentation itself scored?
The project as a whole is scored, but the only way that we know what it is you do or don't know and what decisions you made is based on the information you gave us in what is typically a written document.
So yes, the documentation is scored.
Entering the document.
Mine would not be in crayon, unlike Erik's. So
crayon is perfectly fine. You have both proved yourself capable of recording videos. Recorded video is fine. It doesn't have to be a written document.
Sweet, I can talk. Theoretically.
But yes, the documentation is scored in the sense that you can enter a piece in the open. You can lay your wire weaving on the table and not provide anything else, and it is entered into the open. If you lay a piece of paper that says, I did some wire weaving, and there's no entry to go with it, I would argue you have not, in fact, entered ANS. So yes, the documentation is scored.
Right. So clearly this is incredibly complex for me, for us, for Erik and I. Not anyone else really, but for Erik and I. So I've got my project. I've got some basic documentation here. But clearly I'm going to need some help. Is there a way I can get help? I mean, other than like cold calling a Laurel at like 12:01, Eastern time, like, hey, I've got this embroidery and I need help.
If you have a particular Laurel's phone number, you can probably do that. We also have Stellanova, which is an open fair where you say you're interested in working on X project, and we match you with a Laurel that is interested in supporting you in X project. So you don't have to know them. You can make requests of like, I would like them to live in my barony if possible, or I don't care where they live. I'm fine doing Zoom meetings, or email or text or whatever works for you. So we do have a system of support there, but it doesn't have to be a Laurel. Anyone who has a knowledge in your area and wants to support you in your area is totally fine. One of the best things that I recommend going to Magna Faire for if you're interested in entering something is seeing what other people, what types of documentation, what types of things, how did they do it? I changed my documentation style at Magna Faire a lot by seeing what other people did and how they approached it. Does that answer the question? What was the question? Could you cold call a Laurel? Yes, you can cold call a Laurel. You can also cold call anyone else of interest, assuming they've given you their phone number.
Apparently, you can't cold call Duke Thomas if you need help with embroidery. I don't know why, but he says you can't.
Well, that's fair. But you could probably cold call Duke Thomas if you needed help with documentation. Because the kind of information that needs to go in for your embroidery project, what's it based on? What are your materials? Why did you make the decisions? The pattern that you chose? Like, that doesn't matter if you're entering embroidery or you're entering a wooden box. So he could probably cold call him for help with the documentation.
I'm sorry, I'm incorrect. He doesn't say you can't cold call him if you need help with embroidery. He says don't.
Oh, well, there you go. See, that's different.
That's different. My bad. Completely.
So what I'm hearing is that everyone should cold call Duke Thomas at some point this week and ask about embroidery. Now, let's say I have a project or a performance or a vague idea that I would like to do something. Is there a specific form it should take, what it should look like, how I should present it, or should I just run wild with my flight of fancy?
Yeah, all that sounds fine. Okay, so if you have an idea,
I'm just imagining Erik running wild with the performative arts.
People that love ANS get very excited about people being excited, and it's really as simple as that.
I will have you know that I have won the performing arts segment of Magna Faire before. So nah.
I've never won Magna Faire. I don't think.
I'm not allowed to be on this show anymore. Just gonna leave the two of you here to talk.
I would suggest that if you have a vague idea of a project that you think it wants to be an ANS, if you have the end goal already knowing that it wants to be an ANS project, document, not documentation per se, but document your entire process. I have an idea. I looked at this picture. I looked at this woodwork. I found this, and I'm going to make something that looks like that. Pictures of all of that. Track your references. Don't try to figure out a year and a half from now, what book was that in? When you decide you're going to start with your embroidery pattern, like, okay, I'm going to base it off this pattern, and I'm going to buy the wool at Gulf Wars. And so now I have wool thread, and take little snippets of those wool thread and put them aside and find out how they were dyed or what colors, just document your process. And then when you get to, like I said, it's usually written, but if you get to the end and writing is not your thing, now you have picture documentation. This was the thread I used. This was the picture I based it on. This was the first time that I outlined my pattern. This is it halfway done. This is it 3/4 of the way done. This is when I figured out, oops, I meant to make that yellow and now it's red. So new pattern. And just documenting your process is really cool. And it's very exciting to see how someone thinks through something. And if you're planning that, document as you go. That is absolutely the number one recommendation I would give you. What usually happens is, I made a thing. Can I put this in ANS? And of course you can put in an ANS, but do you remember how you made that thing? Was that a 9th century Norse thing? Or was it an 8th century Swedish thing? Or do you remember all this information? So that's called back documenting. When you've already done the thing, you've already made all the decisions, you don't remember what decisions you were presented with, you don't remember what colors you picked it from, you don't remember what book you got this out of, you don't remember what picture you looked at. And so that is much harder in terms of like feeling overwhelmed and not knowing how to pull it all together. It's doable, it's manageable. But if you have a vague idea, run wild, just take pictures along the way.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit far afield here because it's what I do.
Here we go.
All right, so
It's a Eric's hot cake.
yes. So let's say you have an interest in a thing. We'll say migration era garnet trade. All right, so let's say you have an interest
Oddly
in this,
specific.
but you have like the obvious way to manifest that is like in jewelry making. But let's say you don't have actually skill at that. Let's say you're a ham-fisted barbarian. What are other options that people have for being involved in the ANS community with their interest if they're not actually good with their hands?
Most of ANS is, hey, I made a thing. So that is the typical. You can there are other categories. There's live arts where, hey, I did a thing or I'm doing a thing, which is similar to performing arts, which is another category. There's also a research paper. So that I haven't seen a research paper entered not as a written document. I'm sure you can make the argument for some sort of long form video essay. But you could write down everything you've learned because you're super geeky about your migration era garnet trade. And so you could write all that up in pictures if you have it, in sources if you have them, in bullet point formats, in long paragraphs because you just really like writing essays. All of that is totally fine. And just tell us about it. There's also a new form coming at Magna Faire. That's the poster format. So you can put pictures on a poster. If you love that science fair project approach and you really want a 3/4 tri piece cardboard back into your life, you can enter it at Magna Faire. Yeah, so there's just some other options. I have seen some entries where it was a collection of things. So the individual didn't actually, well, she made a few things, but she was making an object of elements that would have been relevant to her persona. And one person wouldn't have made the utensils and their hair wrappings and their, everything that you use throughout your life, you would not have made, you would have purchased. So you can, and that was her ANS entry. And I think it scored pretty well. And so she was just gathering things together, but her documentation, her pictures, she had lots of pictures of, see, this person has this comb and this spoon and this fork all in one picture. So this is, these are period appropriate for this persona. So she was gathering things. So that was a really unique, way to do it, and a really cool way to see how she was thinking about her persona and the tools and the objects that person would have had. So that was a really cool entry.
Oh, thank you.
That sounds awesome, actually.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. That sounded really cool.
I'm just trying to picture Erik doing any of that, and my brain is starting to shut down. So I'm going to move to the next question. All right. So I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions in the, are there any pitfalls that I should watch out for between coming up with a project and entering a project? And should I, now that I have a project, should I just, go for it, or should I actually run that past someone before I enter it? So it's sort of a multi-parter there on you.
I think that it's entirely up to your personality. If you're just go for it kind of person, then yeah, slap that on the table, put down some basic documentation, and see what kind of feedback you get back. If you're a perfectionist and you want it to go well, and this is important to you, and putting yourself out is, slapping your things down on the table gives some anxiety. If that gives you anxiety, then yeah. Sure. Yes, you should show it to someone else first. Sorry, I didn't mean to break your session. I apologize.
So,
Nope. We're all fine here.
Nope.
Everything's fine.
So
How
the
are you?
lesson here is that before you show your thing to a crowd, you should ask someone else to look at your thing to make sure it's worth seeing.
That is not a required step.
Just an advised one.
If you are confident and ready for feedback,
Are you going to
Oh
be
my God,
scored
I
on
need
your
to, like,
thing?
video mute Ulrich.
Nope. Go ahead. Everything's fine here.
So the scoring on your thing is from 1 to 5.
Per category. Each category is 1 to 5. And there are 4 categories that we use in Meridiace.
Ah, okay. Right. So we're going to skip right over the whole showing your thing to people right now. And we're going to move on to, we've shown our thing to everyone. Now we're on our way to an event.
Okay. You've entered your project.
Is it okay to just show up with my thing and show it to everyone? Or should I have done something beforehand?
Okay. You may enter your, I'll just keep my eyes closed or whatever. You can enter your project by just showing up. That's fine. If you want feedback, we do recommend you registering, and it's just a form that tells us you're coming. And that's a logistical thing. These rooms have tables and space, and we try to plan 3 feet of space per project in case someone has a very large thing. Sorry. I'm sorry.
She's not sorry.
I don't get any cider anymore. This is like gross. So yes, we try to plan 3 feet of table space for each entry. So if we're expecting 12 entries and 24 show up, we are short of table space, and there is much scrambling and calling of squires and proteges and various other people who are around being supportive to try to set up more tables and wrangle tables and take tables out of the kitchen and not give them back to the kitchen because we didn't ask the feast crat, and various other permutations of space. So if you tell us you're coming, we can manage that a bit better. Also, if you are looking for feedback, what we have taken over the last 5 or 6 years in this, stop laughing. All right.
Look, if I'm going to bring my thing and show it to people, I want feedback on it.
Okay, well, if you want feedback, then you should warn us that you are coming so that we can put together an appropriate panel of people to provide you feedback. So if you're entering embroidery and the only people we have, and you're, you want to be scored because you're fighting or whatever, you want to be scored at noon, then we need to find someone who's not doing lunch, who isn't teaching a class, in order to give you feedback. And if the only people we have available are soap making laurels, then you're not going to get the best possible feedback on your embroidery entry. They can give you feedback of like, I don't understand, what did you do, or where is this based, and this information, you don't seem to know this information, and I don't know this information, so someone of us should go find out this information. So they can give you some feedback about that, but they can't tell you how to improve your embroidery, which presumably is the feedback you're looking for. All that is to say, you don't have to tell us you're coming, but if you do tell us you're coming, we will be sure to have space for you, and we will do our best to get people available in your area of interest to give you feedback on your area of interest.
It's important to have people who actually want to see your thing.
Yes.
To be there to look
important.
at your thing. Consent is key.
And they should be knowledgeable about your thing to give you the best feedback.
Right?
Yes.
All right. So I have arrived.
I want to go on a tangent here. Where's my little alien Where's my camera? There it is.
Is this it? Go
I
for
want to
it.
go on a little tangent here because there is a different.
He's going off script.
There's a different philosophy among judges, and it has to do with how comfortable people are giving feedback. Judges are volunteers. Judges are people. Shocking sometimes. I'm actually fairly comfortable giving feedback outside of my area of expertise. I've never made soap. I don't have any interest in soap. We don't have a lot of soap making laurels. Well, that's probably a bad example because we do, but say we didn't. Or they're not at Magna Faire. You've entered your soap at Magna Faire, and the soap making rollers are not at Magna Faire. I feel confident in my research knowledge of looking into various things that I could look at your documentation and give you feedback to the sense of, you said that 8th century Vikings wouldn't have access to pig fat, and that doesn't sound right to me. Or you said that it would be exclusively from humpback whales and no other animal fat would be used. Like, there's a lot of other animals running around. Like, where are your sources? Why do you think that? What did you read that made you think that? Like, you and I could engage in a conversation of how you approached your project and how you approached founding your project in the historical documents that are available. So assuming that none of the soap laurels are available at Magna Faire, where you've entered your documentation for soap making, I feel like I could provide feedback. There are other judges, and not all judges are laurels. That's not a requirement. But there are other judges that aren't comfortable giving that feedback outside of their area, and so they'll decline. So that is yet another reason, if you tell us you're coming, I don't have to go, or whoever's running the fair doesn't have to go through 5 people to find one who's confident and comfortable giving you feedback.
Okay.
I don't remember. Did I go? I went off topic for that. Hopefully, I'm out of background.
That's fine. You're good. It's your show. We're all just here along for the ride. It's all good. Someone brought up in the comments that it's important, if you're going to bring your thing and show your thing, it's important to let people know you're coming, so that people who actually want to see your thing can be there to see it and judge your thing.
Yes, it is not.
All right.
If you just you weren't planning to come, but now you're just hoping someone has space to squeeze you in, come anyway.
So I'm on site. This is my first ANS event. I did not warn anyone that I was coming. What do I do now?
If you want to enter and you didn't tell anyone you're coming, then as soon as you troll in, you should go find who's ever running or setting up ANS and tell them you're there, so that they can work on tracking down tables and shifting projects and making sure you have space. First and foremost, you want space to put your stuff out. If you can do that at night when you're trolling in, great. If you can't do it till the morning when they're trying to do judging wrangling and start the judges meeting so that everyone gets their assignments in order to give you feedback, that just becomes one more thing that they need to make sure you have space for. In this kingdom, we don't do category setups, so you don't have to wait for no, I'm entering Persian bread, and I can only go in the corner with the rest of the bread. We lost Ulrich, but you don't have to wait to find a specific spot, but you do have to have table space, and you don't want it to be anywhere near the kitchen because someone will eat it for lunch. So that's where
that makes sense.
You need to tell whoever's running the fair. You need to tell whoever's running the fair to make sure that you have space in a safe area that no one will eat your entry for lunch.
It's important that no one eat your thing without permission.
Correct. And actually, I think right now, and I might be talking a little bit out of turn, but I don't think we're allowing food entries because pandemic right now at all.
Yeah, that's totally a thing. All right, so there were some questions. Doug Grove asks, is there any issue with bringing a table to help show your thing?
Not at all. We might still have to navigate some space that you have a place to put said table that isn't blocking other people's entries. But if you're entering a table, you do not have to figure out how to put the table on the table. Yeah, it's just, again, it's coordinating space. But that's sort of an administrative task. Yes, whatever you have, bring it. If it is large and might not fit in a 3-foot table space, we'd appreciate, people that might be running the fair would appreciate knowing you're coming.
Katie, so Eric's down for a second. So Song asks, are there any tips for performing arts entries or things people can't necessarily see?
Again, registering, telling people that you intend to enter a performing arts. We'll try to make sure that they have space, and what kind of performing arts might matter. So it's pretty typically across the board 1 o'clock. Performing arts is presented at 1 o'clock, and that's sort of saved in the schedule. But if it's a big bardic song where there's an audience is intended, then maybe doing that during the feast makes a lot of sense. It involves more people. You have to deal with the projection and a crowded mead hall, and that all goes to the ambiance of your entry. If it's something, there was a hand washing entry, so one of those live arts, it's a process. There's a ceremony to how you might wash your hands in period. It's something of a religious ceremony, and so someone was presenting this hand washing ceremony. That's a harder thing to do in front of the feast hall where everybody's eating and there's no elevation. Nobody can see you anyway. So how you might present that might be very different. That might, if you're comfortable, maybe that's something that's just presented to high table or just a particular table of judges. If you don't want an audience. So I think my big tip for performing arts is, again, letting people know you're coming and what it is you're entering, so that we can give you the best possible space that might work for that. If you're entering a dance, when I've entered dance, you still have the documentation. A lot of times we see just, that piece of paper put on the table because there's no physical entry that goes, there's no static table entry that goes with it. And that's totally fine, but do the poster, take pictures, put the manual out, the dance manual out, something that people are like, hey, what's this? Oh, it's being presented at 1. Cool. So they know to look for it. So yeah, those are a couple tips. If you had anything specific, you're more than welcome to reach out. Really to anyone. A fair organizer can put you in touch. A Laurel can put you in touch. Reach out to someone and be like, hey, I want to enter this thing. Is there someone that can guide me? Don't cold call Duke Thomas on embroidery because he apparently said no.
Yeah, he's anti-embroidery. He's an embroidery hater from way back.
I happen to know he's a bit of a fiber geek, so embroidery it might just be the the slightest side thing that he can't handle another hobby. Don't introduce him.
I'm totally teasing.
Oh, I know. We all love Duke Thomas.
But you should still cold call him.
Just not about embroidery.
Or do, because Ulrich's not the boss of you. So
I could be your supervisor.
So let's talk about something that's near and dear to both mine and Ulrich's heart: judging.
I knew you'd go in there.
All right. So now that you've brought your thing to site, you showed it to someone for approval, and now you've tossed it on the table. Now we're down to brass tacks, and your thing is the belle of the fair ball. So how is your thing going to be judged? How many people will be judging your thing? And what are the criteria for the judging?
So the judging rubrics are available online at ANS websites. They're usually linked to all the fairs, so you can see exactly the rubric that the judges will be given. There's 4 categories, and let me back up a little bit. So you'll be given, how we've been doing it in the last 5 or so years, you'll be given a time. So your judging panel is going to meet at 10:30. If you want to be present, which we encourage, but is not required. If you're like, nope, I don't want it. No, just give me a number at the end. It's that's your thing. Fine. You can leave and not be present. But a lot of people like to be part of that conversation. And again, that really helps get you better feedback too, because we know the judging panels know what it is you know and what it is you don't know, so they can help guide you in the areas that you're interested in growing. Anyway, so you'll be given a time, like 10:30, your judging panel. It'll be you and probably 3 is what we aim for, 3 judges. And there might be a 4th shadow judge. So if you're interested in learning how to judge, you can shadow judge, which you sit and you watch the process and you don't talk. That's a challenge. You don't talk. You're a shadow. Shadows don't talk. Anyway, so there'll typically be 3 judges and a person who's trying very hard not to talk, but will probably talk. And so the 4, potentially 5 of you will have a conversation about what it is you entered, what it is you know, what it is you're excited about. And there's the 4 categories: the overall documentation, the authenticity, the technique. And I'm a bad Laurel and don't remember the 3rd right. Artistry. Did I say that one already? I don't know. Hold on. I'm just gonna. So there's 4 categories. Look up the guided documentation and the judging rubrics. And they'll just walk through it. They're like, did you make reasonable substitutions? Did you use appropriate materials? Did you have a reason why you didn't? And any reason is fine. It's not like, oh, well, I didn't buy the $24 gold carat per inch, whatever. I instead bought the silver because it was only $16 and like whatever. The wire weaving comes in gold and silver and you made one in silver, fine. If you made it in copper, well, the silver is too expensive. Like that's a fine reason if you know that it would have been in silver. Like you're rationally choosing to make it in copper for, I'm just learning how to do this and didn't want to buy silver. Totally fine reason. That tells me that in period it would have been in silver. And that's the important point. I don't remember the question. Judging panel, what happens?
Right.
They're going to walk through those 4 categories and give you feedback.
That's basically it. Right.
So these judges, they're going to score me. How does that work? If a 20 is perfect, so it's really 100, is a 15 a C and like a 12 a D and like a 10 a 50
No.
or 11 a 55? So I failed. You're going to throw me out of A&S now forever because I didn't pass. I got an 11.
And then you'll be attacked by Connell's flesh-eating laurels, right?
Absolutely.
No one other than the A&S minister who's running the fair and the judges and you will know the score. The score is not announced at Feast. We might announce the high scores, like, hey, this was our high score of today. But we won't say, and they got a 17, which is, by the way, a high score. So no, no one knows. They're not ranked. It's not posted on the gym door and everyone flocks to find out what their score is and mock everybody who scored lower than them.
So this is not like fighting at all.
We don't do that. So you get a score. So each category is out of 5. So 20 is the highest. But 3 is good in each category. So if you get a 12, your entry was good. That's why a 17 is still a high score, because that means you got 4 in several categories, potentially 5 in one category. 2s and 1s aren't bad. You're not out of the SCA. It's just they're lacking some knowledge. And that's where not everything needs to be written. And being present in verbally in that conversation, because not everybody's primary communication is written word. Or complete sentences, and that's totally fine. So if we can have a conversation where it's like, okay, I was super confused about this whole paragraph, and I don't know if you think this should be made out of copper or silver. Or I'm dyslexic, or I'm a slow reader, and you gave me 50 pages, and I'm not going to read these 50 pages by the 10:30 judging meeting because I got to cite at 9 and I need to get dressed. So having that conversation of, do you think it should be made out of copper or silver? Cool. Why do you think that? Awesome. That sounds great. So that conversation has really made documentation so much easier in my perspective. Am I off topic again?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, good.
All right. So I'm like not even sure where we're at anymore. Like, I should mention that this is like the first one of these that I've actually been drinking at. So at any point, anything could happen.
I'm so happy.
Like that I've been drinking. Yay. So, all right. My thing has been judged, weighed, and measured.
All right. Awesome. Good for you.
All right. So what's next? I mean, like, can I keep just showing people my thing? Do I have to somehow get another thing? What happens?
Whatever you want. It's all good. It really, I know, I mean, really, whatever works for you is fine. And I keep saying that, or some variation of that. But if you want to, if you get feedback and you want to make changes, then we'd really encourage, we want to see that. We get excited about that. Judges like to see if they are confused about something or ask a question. So you enter something in Magnifair and you get feedback. And sometimes it's feedback you don't intend to do anything about. So Ulrich entered his embroidered hood and he did it all out of polyester fibers. And it's very pretty, but the feedback he got was it should have been out of wool. And he knows that now, but he's not going to remake it. Like he spent a lot of time embroidering those hounds and he's not going to remake it. And maybe if he makes a stag hood for a friend later, then maybe he'll use wool for some other project, but he's not going to remake the project that he made. He's going to wear it. You can still, so he entered that in Magnifair. The feedback he got back was, this is a very pretty hood. You did excellent sewing technique, excellent stitch work. You made it all out of polyester. You should have used wool. It sews very differently. It has a different feel, different lay, different colors. You should have used wool.
If you fold it and then you take your
if you crease
fingernails and you crease it. Right.
This is not linen because it doesn't hold the crease. Anyway.
Exactly.
What were you talking about?
Weighed and measured and
right.
Yes.
So he entered it in Magnifair and he got feedback that he has no intention of changing his actual project. He can still update his documentation because now he knows something he didn't before. He knows now that there's different colors that are available in polyester than are available in wool. And so he can update his documentation. He's not changing the entry. So when he gets to midwinter, he's entering the exact same thing, but he's showcasing a growth of knowledge. He's learned more about how this embroidered hood should have been embroidered, even though he's not going to re-embroider the hood. And we're excited to see that. We're excited to see that growth of knowledge. We're excited to see the interest that he has shown in building a repertoire that when he gets around to embroidering a stag hood for his friend, that it's a more authentic piece. So
to be clear, my friend is Bart. My friend getting the stag hood is Bart.
Okay. It's cute you think Bart is your friend.
No, that's great. But at what point do the judges get tired of seeing me showing up with my polyester embroidered hood and showing them my thing and going, how about now?
When you've made no changes. Because there is what I would consider a reasonable, legitimate growth in your self-interest of re-entering something without having made changes. And that's if you're doing it of two vastly different events. So you entered something in Magnifair and you got feedback. You don't intend to do anything with that feedback. You're not going to change anything, but you're going to enter it at Iris Fair. Iris Fair pulls a pretty different group of judges and participants. You're going to get a different panel of judges. Your goal in doing that should be to get not a second opinion per se, but to get a more well-rounded breadth of opinions. So right. Ulrich gave me his opinion, and now I want to hear Erik's. I respect Ulrich's opinion. I'm not discounting Ulrich's opinion. I'm not going to do anything with Ulrich's opinion. I just want to hear Erik's because maybe that will help me. He has a different perspective. Where people get tired of seeing the same entry over and over is when you have no intention of doing anything with the feedback. You just want to be told you're perfect, because then it's not a growth opportunity for you. I'm not going to be excited about you being a perfectionist in and of itself. Like, there's lots of perfectionists. The anxiety around perfectionists does not excite me. But the excitement of, I learned something new and I want to talk about it and I want to show you, and I learned this new thing, and I should make it out of wool next time, and isn't that cool? And Erik, next time I make one, I'm gonna make it out of wool. You want to listen to me talk about wool and polyester and the different colors? And Erik's like, no, but I'm excited about that. So I would want to see that entry again. But if you're not going to make any changes and you're just trying to get a different set of judges so you can get a different score, there's no growth.
Gotcha. No, that's perfect answer.
So what you're saying is trying the same thing all the time and expecting a better result is a flawed thought process.
Yes.
All right. So we have a list of myths and misconceptions from and truths from some previous and future Kingdom Arts and Sciences officers. Would you like to cover those? Do you have time? We're actually running about probably about 10 minutes behind. Do you have an extra 10 minutes before we go into the closing section, or do you want us to go ahead and do the wrap up now? And it won't hurt our feelings in any way, whichever way you go.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm totally fine.
Okay, Erik?
I am not all the way finished. Although I'm not sure this would improve our quality of conversation. But.
I think it makes it great. Katerina, are you good?
Yep.
All right. Katerina says we're good. So.
Erik just stole my mug. Do you have the same mug?
His is not the same.
Wait, okay, never mind. Mine's green, yours is white. Please continue.
Do you have the updated version, Erik?
I think so, but if I don't, I can just wing it. It's fine.
Sweet.
What's the worst that could happen? All right.
Nothing.
So this is actually a truth, apparently. And it starts off, we're all just big nerds. You guys are all just big nerds. Anyway, if you get excited about your geek, we'll get excited about your geek no matter what it is. Is that true? Are there people who are going to be like, no, that's just dumb?
There's always that stick in the mud that will say that's just dumb. But there are always people that will be excited about your geek. I get super excited about wire weaving, and you can be master of it in 25 minutes. But I still want to talk your ear off for 2.5 hours.
It's true, but it's adorable, so it's fine.
I will bang on tables about trigonopoly.
There's apparently 3 ways to spell trigonopoly, by the way. I don't know if you knew that or not. So, there's a myth. Your first entry has to be perfect.
Hopefully, I have not said anything in this last hour and a half that would lead you to believe that we expect perfection, or that I would even encourage perfection. So, no, that is very, very much a myth. Like I said, I have entered things that were not finished, not even what I intended to enter, and just been like, all right, Magna Fair is happening. I'm not done, and I can't sew in the dark. So, so no. And in fact, it's better to enter it before you think it's perfect, because then you're getting the feedback and you can make the changes. So if Ulrich had put his documentation together and entered the idea of his embroidered hood before he put a bunch of polyester thread all over it, then the feedback he would have had a chance to incorporate that feedback.
Time out. I'm being slandered. I have way too many Laurel friends that would have stopped me long ago and been like,
right, but
what the hell are you doing?
You already have the network of people who would have hurled themselves across your lap and said, no,
right.
Don't put embroidery, or don't put polyester there.
So, allegedly would have done polyester. New person Ulrich would have done polyester, maybe.
Well, right.
I know about the crease.
But for someone who's not sure if they're ready to enter ANS or what's required for ANS, or is uncertain that they don't have a perfect thing, so is worrying about entering ANS, one has to assume, well, I guess they don't have to assume, I would assume that people with those level of anxieties don't already have a well-established Laurel network of people to ask. Because if they did have a well-established Laurel network of people to ask, they would have been encouraged that perfection was not required.
I don't know if your Laurel friends are like my Laurel friends, but if I
think
by
I'm in both
encouraged, you mean if by encouraged, you mean like if you enter that polyester embroidery shop, we're going to kill you.
No,
You're a reflection on us.
I very much disagree with that, actually.
Blink twice if the Laurels won't let you use polyester.
No, that's not true. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we want to see your polyester. If you don't have the knowledge, the skills, or the materials to do it otherwise, we'd rather see your polyester than not see anything at all. If you're excited about your embroidering your hood, we want to see it. And it doesn't matter if it's in polyester. But we're going to have a conversation of, are you aware that polyester has a different color palette and a different material and a different year of availability? And we want to have those conversations. And if you're not interested in those conversations, then just lay it on the table in the open and don't seek feedback because you're not interested in the feedback, which is fine. But if you're asking for feedback, we're going to have a conversation.
And we're being silly about the polyester, but you're also being serious about the polyester. And I want to actually cover something here. You say, if you want to enter it in polyester, that's fine. But a lot of people don't understand that when you had that conversation with them about, okay, so this would have been done in wool. We understand why you did it. We understand your reasoning. We understand your documentation. They don't understand that all they hear is, well, I got in trouble because I didn't do it in wool. And the Laurels or the judges or whoever were mean to me. And I think you've done a good job of explaining that's not the case. We're just trying to explain that this was the conversation. You asked for this feedback.
We're trying to share our knowledge and we're trying to build you as a historical embroiderer.
Right.
And that's going back to where I had mentioned Stella Nova. That's an element of Stella Nova is when you're paired with a Laurel to help you through your first entry. And that can be a friend or that can be a cold match or however. That Laurel is also going to sit in with you during your judging panel. So that's an element of Stella Nova. So it's going to be you, your sponsor, the Laurel that's helped you put the project together, and your three judges. And part of the sponsor's job there is to listen and to take notes. They're not there to argue on your behalf. This is your project, your knowledge. You showcase it. But at the end of the day, what they're to help you to do when the judges walk away, they're there to say, that's not what they said. They didn't say your entry was polyester crap. That's not what they said. That's not what they said. Because that is what you hear. They didn't like it. I made it out of polyester. I didn't know any better and they hate it. It's like, so having that sponsor, that friend, having someone there to be like, that's not what they said. They said it was a really good effort. And the next one you should consider using wool. And here's some, people get excited. They will give you resources. They might offer you, here, I have a skein of wool, give it a try. It feels incredibly different working with different materials. But if you don't enter it and tell the ANS community that you're interested in embroidery, no one's going to offer you, no one's going to walk up to a random person and say, hey, are you interested in embroidery? Here's some wool. Go give it a try. Rarely. They might, actually. That does happen in the SCA, but... Anyway, Stella Nova gives you that sounding board of managing the critique of they attacked me, they're mean and they think my stuff is crap, to no, they told you how to improve and they think you're doing a really good job and you're on the right path. Because those are different. They're hard to hear. They can be. Anyway.
So we're going to go to our next myth, and that is we, and I'm assuming this is the ANS community, the Laurels in general, probably in general, don't like unusual projects.
I have never heard that particular myth. I think there's a great many people who get excited about the unusual. They love to see things they've never seen before, or to see a new approach to things they haven't seen before. You know, and using myself again with wire weaving. Wire weaving is fairly, like, you'll see it a lot. There'll be lots of classes at Gulf Wars, because it's something simple that, you know, if you do have the hand dexterity and the interest, you really can master fairly quickly. You know, so that in and of itself is not unique. But sort of my obsession with there's actually 3 different kinds, really was sort of a unique project, because I was arguing that, like, no, this is different than that, this picture and that picture and this, and no, they're not the same. And, you know, so I would argue that my entries were taking something that everybody can find at almost any event and making it unique. And the same, you know, embroidery is not unique. People love to see embroidery because it's a new pattern, or it's a new stitch, or it's based on a new find. There's lots of things you can do to make it new and to make it yours. You know, there's lots of card weaving patterns out there, but you designed your pattern because you wanted puppies to be in the pattern. You know, so you designed something modern that you brought to it, but that's really cool, even though card weaving in of itself isn't unique. But then there's crazy unique things that people enter, and that, you know, that's awesome, of like, they did that, they had that. The prosthetic noses, I mean, medieval prosthetic noses was a thing. And, you know, so those entries are super cool. I've seen urine dyeing materials using human urine, which is pretty unique, fascinating. I don't care to judge it. I know nothing about dyeing, and not one that I would choose to jump in on. Poison garden. That was another really cool one. Someone put together, like, hey, these are the plants, this will poison you. And that was her entry. You know, so basically, I hope I've given examples that, you know, it goes both ways. Embroidery is something you see all over the SCA. Yes, we want to see your embroidery project. Poison gardens is not something one hopefully comes across very often, but we want to see that too, because you're excited about it and we want to learn how to poison people, in theory.
I think I know who that
how
was.
They would have done it, period.
All right. Last myth before we get on to the wrap up of the show, unless there's something that you want to cover before we do that, is there's always at least one flesh-eating laurel judging, just to keep the mean laurel myth going. There's always that myth, one. Right? That is a myth.
Yeah.
I've never actually personally met a flesh-eating laurel. I would try to avoid those. Sounds more like a zombie, but you know.
We don't invite zombies to attend. Or no, I guess it's vampires that have to be invited, right?
It is vampires that have to be invited. Zombies don't care. Zombies just walk straight through the threshold, don't care at all. Vampires have to be invited.
You know, judges are people. Some people suck. Try not to let them ruin your event.
That is the best advice ever in any SCA event. You know, some people suck. Don't let them ruin your event. Solid advice.
Yeah. All right. Then we'll leave it there. Oh, no, I won't leave it there. If there's if you had a bad experience with a particular person for whatever reason, again, you can talk to the organizers of the event, because they're scrambling around trying to put your judging panels together, and they're trying to think of people who might be able to give you good feedback, who have entered something in that category before, who has done something similar. You know, so if I'm running an event, I'm trying to come up with names of people who might be able to give you good feedback. If you have a particular problem with a particular person, that person bit your puppy and you just don't want to have a conversation with them, just tell me, you know, I don't include so-and-so on my panel, please. And that's an easy conversation. You don't have to tell me why. You don't have to go into details about what a terrible puppy biting person they are. Just tell me you don't want them on their panel. And that's an easy enough thing you don't have to deal with that person.
So no one should bite puppies. Puppy biting is bad. It's right there with cat juggling. No one should do that. That's just wrong. But a quick question that I just thought of here. do you guys have feedback for judges? Like a feedback form for the person entering to write about your judges?
Formally, we don't. When I was A&M's minister in the fairs that I have run, I have had people come up and say, not this person. And it can be as simple as, they judged me at Magna Fair. Can you find someone new at Midwinter? Sometimes the answer is going to be no. I have 15 people to judge 35 entries, and you're going to have to double up a little bit. But yeah, if I forget the question. Oh, is there feedback about judging?
Yeah, is there a way a formal way to give feedback about judges?
There is not a formal way, but talking to the organizer or talking to your friend the Laurel or your sponsor the Laurel or the whoever, be it the Laurel, the Ovo, the person running the ANS fair, giving them feedback is really useful, and we appreciate it. Because we even have feedback of this person and this person should not judge together. They're both great judges independently, but they get into a vortex when they're together, and we should keep them apart. So again, that's part of the administration and the behind the scenes and just making things work. We want you to have a good experience. We don't want it to turn into these two people bickering. So there's always an informal avenue of, please don't assign this judge to me. I had a bad experience. There's always an informal avenue. There isn't a formal avenue that I can think of right now.
Okay, it was just an idea of curiosity. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the wrap up for the show. And the wrap up is, all right, last chance. Anything else that you want to cover before we go that we may have missed?
Is that direct?
Or any information you want to give out? Just you? Yeah. If you're like, dude, Ulrich, Erik, we've gone an hour and 37 minutes into the show, and you didn't ask me this. What are you, idiots? Have you never entered an ANS before? This is the point to give this that.
I think thanks for having me. I enjoyed drinking and laughing with y'all. But I think we touched on most of it. Basically, give it a try. If you think it sounds interesting, if you think you want feedback, try and one event will never be the same as another. Go to Magna Fair, look at what's out there, how other people are structuring their documentation, how they're putting their display. Some people put a lot of effort in their display on the table. And that's really cool to see. It catches the interest of the person walking by, which again, that all goes to building your network of like, hey, Ulrich does really cool embroidery. And the embroidery people are going to start talking to him about his really cool embroidery. And then other people will be like, hey, can you make me a stag hood? Because that would be really dope. But those conversations aren't going to happen if you never put it out on the table.
So what you're saying is take my thing to the event, slap it out on the table, let people look at it.
Yeah.
Follow that, Erik.
So this is the point where we give shout out. So I'm going to give a shout out to everyone who's throwing their thing up on the table and letting everyone take a look at it. I'd also like to thank the Barony of Osprey for doing a really good job hosting a Guadeloupe and coronation at the same time. And I know that had to be at least a little bit stressful with that combination of events, particularly as we've not been having them lately. But they did a really bang-up job, and it was a blast. How about you, Maestra Serafina?
Any shout-outs you want to give?
I did not prepare for this.
You can shout yourself out.
Well, honestly, thank you, too, for having the conversation and for everyone who threw in questions and misconceptions. This is something I really love doing, and I do love talking about it. I did not perhaps prepare as well as maybe I should have, so this was all off the top of my head. I am sorry for all the innuendos, except I'm not really. So thanks.
She's not sorry.
There were innuendos?
There were innuendos, too. But those are, sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
Totally done. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to give not so much of a shout out, but just to let folks know that I have been picked up as a coach on the Coach's Corner. You can catch us on Fridays on the Coach's Corner, and on the SCA Virtual Fighter Practice page. So that's kind of cool. But my biggest shout out is to the ANS community, the arts and sciences community in general, for doing this, the stuff that makes the SCA really pretty and makes the educational side of things work. People. All right, so actually, here's an Ulrich's hot take for a minute. That something that's been bugging me for a while now. A lot of times you'll hear people talking about going into SCA events, like, fighting's what catches everyone's eye, and that's the big flashy thing that we do. And then everyone gets into the SCA and gets involved in all the other things. I don't know if you guys know this or not. I mean, most of the Laurels, I think, know this, but that day's past. It's not the fighting that catches people's eye anymore. It's the fighting that catches the guys' eyes, and maybe a little bit of a few other things at a demo. But it's the amazing clothes and the beautiful heraldry and the fantastic pavilions and setups that people come by at demos and see that are produced by our artisans that catch people's eye. And then there's the fighting, and then there's the other stuff. But it's that stuff. It's the beautiful gowns that the ladies wear. It's the surcoats that the guys are wearing that make it look medieval. Because we could all just be a bunch of guys out there in football pads beating the heck out of each other in sticks, and everyone's going to think, that's weird, kind of neat. But if we're doing that in all the right garb and making us the armor that the armorers made to make us look period and make us look medieval, that's what catches the eye. Yeah, the fighting's fun and it helps, but it's the other stuff that really locks us in to being and looking medieval, and that's what gets people involved, in my not so humble opinion in this case. All right, so there's that. I went off script there. Sorry, not sorry. Where am I? Thank you, Maestra Serafina, for joining us and being a fantastic font of knowledge and hilarity and innuendo. And don't ever apologize for innuendo. I love an entendre. I twice as much love a double entendre. And if you can give me a triple entendre, I'm a happy man. Of course, thanks to our support crew, Jessica, Adriana, Katerina, who pulled double duty tonight. Kikuchi, Margaret, and most importantly, you, our audience, for joining in whenever we the hell decide to do a show these days. I don't know how that works, but thank you all very much.
Right now, we only have one more video planned, and after Ulrich's heretical comments about fighting, I'm not really sure that we're even going to get to that one. But if we do, it's going to be the video of me dancing in the cat suit, singing "I'm Too Sexy," because this kingdom is really generous, and we really appreciate all your donations. And I'm not sure why you would be willing to pay for my humiliation, but there you have it, and you're going to get it.
So if you're watching the replay on YouTube or live show on YouTube, don't forget to press like and subscribe down here. Maybe smash that bell for notifications so that you know when the videos happen. And if you're watching on Facebook, up here in the corner, like and follow. By the way, if we get 33 more subscribers on Facebook, on YouTube, we'll get our own name in our, I don't know. It's something cool happens to our channel. There you go.
Awesome. Now, finally, two things really. First of all this talk about wire weaving, I'm going to figure out how to wire weave. I've been told it'll only take me like 25 minutes, and then I'm going to master it. So then I'll hold forth on my mastery of wire weaving. Also, if you're watching live, give us about 5 minutes for a break, and then feel free to join us on the Zoom for the after show. Watch the live feed comments on Facebook for the link. We'll hang out and chat for about a half an hour after the show, and Graf and Katerina is going to kindly post it now.
All right. We have merch. Why we have merch is because a few of you guys asked us for it. The proceeds from the merch go to pay for things like this subscription to StreamYard that we use to make these shows, things like that. And we appreciate any garb or things you may buy. There are T-shirts, there are masks, there are duffel bags. There's weird stuff. I don't understand how it all works. But thanks. Go there, buy something or don't. I don't care. You're grown adults. Thanks, everybody. Love you to
Go forth
pieces.
in art and or science.
Or fight. Thanks, Serafina.
And if I die in battle, tomorrow I'll be home, though it's 70 days march to there from Rome. But a soul travels swiftly on the night wind, and if I die in battle, I'll be home again.